All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Poseidon Nickel presentation at the MST Access Micro and Small Caps Conference. My name's Michael Bentley. I'm an MST Access analyst and part of the team of 7 analysts that we have in the MS Access squad now. Very privileged to have today Poseidon Nickel speak to us and the CEO, Peter Harold. Pete's a absolute legend in the nickel industry. He's been around for, I won't say how long, Pete, it's a while now in the nickel game, so knows it well. And he's been the CEO of Poseidon for the last, I think it's 12 months now, Pete, or is it a bit longer than that? And has been very successful drilling results in the Golden Swan deposit. So looking forward to hearing the latest on that and some new drill results out today. So, Pete, I'd like to hand it over to you and we'll get the latest on Poseidon. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks for allowing us to join in today. Look, I have been in the industry for about 30 years. I think I started 3 years out of university. I did a couple of years in oil and gas and realised how hard that was. And I saw the bright side and went across to base metals, and nickel has been pretty much in my blood ever since. So, yes, 30 years now. And as you probably remember, I worked on this project back in the mid-90s when it was discovered. So I'll talk a bit about that. So I've sort of circled back around after some years in a different business and came back in about 15 months ago. I joined in about March. So you're right, just over 12 months. And it's been a really exciting time. So let me run you and the investors and potential investors through the story. So look, that's the competent persons and disclaimer, which I'll assume everyone's read. Quick company overview. So look, we're a Western Australian company. We've got 3 assets in Western Australia, all which were previous nickel mines. Combined resource base of over 400,000, or around about 400,000 tonnes of nickel. We've got 2 large processing plants, both of which are on care and maintenance, but were both operational up to about, well, one was about 10 years ago and one was about 5 years ago. We've also got a gold tailings project, which we're doing a feasibility study on. I won't spend any time on that today, but that's there in the background. But we've also just had that recent discovery you talked about, which is the Golden Swan, which is ultra high grade, sort of north of between 5 and 10% hits. And we've got multiple production scenarios which will lead us into production, we believe, about this time next year. And it's high margin production. That's what's so important about this business, and also significant exploration upside. So that's it in a nutshell. And I guess I've got the next 15 minutes to convince investors that are there and the ones that want to be there as to why they should be shareholders in the company. The board made up of a lot of people that have been in the industry for a while. I mean, Derek Lafearle is also the chairman of Sandfire. He's got a legal background. Dean represents our major shareholder, Black Mountain, with 20%. Felicity represents the forest interest with about 13.5%. Peter Bocelli, very well-known nickel sulfide explorer, was involved in Mincor for many years and has joined our board. We're very lucky to have Peter about 12 months ago. He was on the discovery team for Cassini, which is the ore body which Mincor are now developing. And Brendan, who's actually sitting behind the screens here, making sure I don't tell any fibs, he has been with the company since about September of 2 years ago. So he's just under 2 years, and he's got a base metal and experience going back into copper as well. So we've got a really great board and also a senior executive as well. We've got a share price today of about 8 cents, which gives us a market cap of about $250 million. And at the end of March, we had about 15 million in the bank. I mentioned before, we've got the 2 major shareholders, Black Mountain and Forest, with combined of about 35%. And then we've got Regal there, just under substantial. And the rest is high net worth and mums and dads. And you can see there, our share price has pretty much tracked the nickel price, albeit with a couple of blips. And those blips have been the discovery of Golden Swan, and the second lot of drilling results we put out sort of in August of last year, which really got the market excited. And then since then, it's really been, really just leading up to the drill program we're doing now. So, we're really looking forward to some re-rating off the back of the drilling we're doing at the moment. So look, quickly, obviously the nickel demand is growing supersonically, all not only because of stainless steel, but now because of electric vehicles. I won't bore you with the details other than to say that, you know, currently every every vehicle manufacturer in the world is shifting to electric, and it's coming much faster than most people anticipated, to the point now where, you know, some of the manufacturers are talking about no internal combustion engines by 2025, so less than 4 years away, and that's across the board. I'll just draw your attention to the right-hand slide here, or the right-hand graph here, Glencore. So nickel, you can see there, 2019 demand, 2.5 million tonnes. And you're seeing it potentially growing in 30 years' time to nearly 9.5 million tonnes. It's nearly a 4 times increase. That's the biggest increase of all of those battery commodities. So we really are seeing, or the base metals, so we really are seeing a huge, you know, once in an intergenerational growth in nickel, and underpinned by demand for stainless steel, which is still growing, excuse me, compound at sort of 5% per annum since 1970. But all of a sudden, there's a new market, which is electric vehicles. Once in a lifetime intergenerational change. It's like from the horse to the car. We're now going from the internal combustion to electric, and it's going to have a huge impact on the demand for nickel. I'm not exactly sure where all the nickel is going to come from, but I know some of it's going to come from Poseidon, because we've got 3 projects which potentially could be back in production again. And, you know, we're going to need higher prices to incentivise lower grade projects to come on stream. So I see nickel prices stronger for longer, which is really important. And just finally there, just Jaguar 2025, you know, basically all electric, and by 2030, no petrol or diesel cars can be sold in the UK, and that's pretty consistent around the world. So that's going to drive that increase in demand that we talked about. So look, talking first of all about Black Swan, which is the project that's our flagship project. That's an aerial view of the concentrator. That plant has been progressively built since I was involved in the late 90s. Started off at 150,000 tonnes, it got expanded to 600,000, and then 2.2 million tonnes. So you can see in the foreground there's a SAG mill and a ball mill. It's the big plant. You almost can't see the small concentrator because it's tucked in behind, about in the middle there. But we've got the potential to either go for 150,000 tonne, a 600,000 tonne, a 1.1 or a 2.2 million tonne case. So very lucky. The replacement cost of the 2 million tonne plant today would be well in excess of $200 million. So we have a wonderful asset sitting there, just waiting for feed into it. Talking about the project, Silver Swan, the project that I worked on back in 1997, that was a high grade, averaging 5%, but there was a higher grade ore body there. Over the life of the project, which was about 10 years, from 1997 to 2010, so 13 years, nearly 200,000 tonnes of nickel got mined. Predominantly that was high grade, but you can see there was also about 6 million tonnes of lower grade material processed as well. We sit here today with about 16,000 tonnes of 9.5% material in resource at the bottom of Silver Swan, and the processing plant that I talked about. But now we've got Golden Swan, which is just so exciting for us. So let's delve into that. So if I go back to 1995, the gentleman in the middle of the photograph there was David Burt. He was the exploration director of MPI, and he's holding the discovery hole there, which was a drill hole drilled into some previously known mineralisation which hadn't been followed up from the 1970s. So 20 years later, David and his team put together a drill program, picked up the ground that was actually held in a diamond joint venture, and they drilled the discovery hole, and it ran into 15% nickel in the first hole. Within 6 months, they drilled out that resource, 440,000 tonnes at a phenomenal grade of 14%. You know, one of the highest grade nickel sulfide ore bodies ever discovered in the world. 62,000 tonnes of nickel, and we built a concentrator and started processing within 2 years, and we were shipping that concentrate to Finland when I was involved in the company back in the late 90s. That project today, if you put that 62,000 tonnes of nickel through the concentrator today at $8 a pound, your revenue would be in excess of $1 billion Australian dollars. So these are very, very valuable, high margin projects. And what the benefit, of course, is we have all the infrastructure there. We have the plant, all the infrastructure, the underground development, the tailings dam, everything we need for a restart. So looking at it in sort of 3D, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, the original Silver Swan ore body down here, as I'm just here from sort of 200 to about 500 below surface, and then continued all the way down to the bottom here, about 140,000 tonnes of nickel mined out of that system, about another 40,000 tonnes out of the open pit at much lower grade. Here in the purple is our current mineralisation. There's still, as I mentioned, about 16,000 tonnes of nickel at 9%, over 9%. And here, sitting just across to the south, about 300 metres away, is what we call the Golden Swan discovery, sitting in what we call the Southern Terrace. Here are some of the original discovery holes, 8 metres at 8, 9 at 10, and 6 at 9.5. So you can sort of see how excited we were when we discovered that. What we obviously did was decided to put a drill drive in, which we've done. That's about 460 metres across, and now we're drilling out this drilling program here, which is about 60, up to 60 holes, about 13,000 metres of drilling to prove up a resource and then hopefully a reserve. As Michael mentioned, we put out some results today, just adding to the results we put out last week, and you can see some of the numbers there: 3 metres of 6.5 or nearly 7, 4 metres of 5.5, 17 at 3, 10.5 at 3, 9 at 3, 1 at 14.5. These are all, excellent results. And there's also a photograph of a core tray from hole 25, which we haven't assayed yet, but you can see in there, very, very strong mineralisation over that 2 metre interval. And, that's going to be a very good grade just based on the visuals and our XRF machine. So look, really looking forward to those results. And you can see where 25 sits just in here at the bottom of this known current mineralisation trend. So we've got a very big or significant mineralised system over a couple of 100 metres, which is starting to fill out, which is really, directing us towards an ore body and then a mine. What's really interesting is we now have this drive across here, which could be used as a production drive. It's currently being used as an exploration drive. We've got this area here that we know exists. We don't know what's down here below the current known mineralisation. We don't know what's over here. There's very few drill holes, if any, into this area. So this whole area, which is about 300 metres across, and to put it in context, that's a bit wider than what the Silver Swan channel was at 250 metres. And remembering that there's 180,000 tonnes of nickel that's been mined out of there and another 16,000 tonnes in resource. So we're talking about a system that held 200,000 tonnes of contained nickel at over 5%. Why can't we have another one of those over here? And as most investors know, these komatiite channels, like Campbell, tend to exist in clusters. So we've probably found another one. We just have to prove it up. What's also important is that the metallurgy here is very good, and we've had some initial test work done that demonstrated that to a concentrate we'd get over 13% con, up to 20%, and recoveries of north of 90%, with an iron MgO ratio of 50:1. Very, very rare to see that ever. In fact, in the nickel business these days, a lot of the concentrates are high in talc, so the iron MgO ratio is a lot lower. And in fact, a lot of the smelters are actually running on a blend which is not ideal, and so they're looking for material like this. So we would believe that if this was a concentrate or a direct shipping ore, it would be a premium applied to get access to this material. And we've had plenty of interest from the various smelters around the world already. So look, in terms of what we're going to try and do, we're looking at the various different options. Do we sell this to a BHP under an OTCPA, which stands for Ore Treatment Concentrate Processing Agreement? Do we sell the ore direct, or do we fire up the concentrator, the small one, 150,000 tonnes, and sell the concentrate? We'd get a higher return because we'd get better payabilities than ore, but obviously we've got additional capital operating. So all those things have to be studied, and they're all on the table now for review. You can see here in terms of the timetable that we're working towards, we're in Q2 now. The resource drilling is well underway. It's actually ahead of schedule, and we're hoping that we'll finish that in July, and that would allow the met test work to be well completed. And allow us to get our resource out in the third quarter, this calendar quarter of this year, so next quarter, and then be in a position to make a final investment decision on whether we're going for ore or concentrate by the end of this year, and then into production to the middle of next year, assuming we make the decision to proceed. So very, very, near-term production. We're not very far behind Mincor or Panoramic, that are both, restarting operations or mining new ones in the case of Mincor. So I think we're going to sneak up on the market, and realistically, we are the next near-term producer of metal in nickel metal in Western Australia. So that's the Black Swan project. We've got a little bit of time just to talk about Lake Johnson and Windara. Lake Johnson is an old Forrestania project. Began life as part of the Lion ore system, and then ended up under the ownership of Norilsk, the Russian nickel producer, after the takeover of Lion ore for 7 billion Australian dollars back in the mid-2000s. This plant can do about 1.5 million tonne a year. Very well constructed. GR Engineering again, who built Black Swan as well. And what we've got there is a number of different ore bodies. Emily Ann, people forget that was 1.5 million tonnes at 3.5% mined, so very high grade. And that was mined between 01 and 07. And then Maggie Hayes, lower grade, but plenty of tonnes of nickel there, was mined between 8 and 14. And since it was put on care and maintenance in 2015, there's been some work done around Maggie Hayes, and the previous management of this company looked at restarting that before the nickel price collapsed. There's about 50,000 tonnes of nickel, about 1.5%. There's definitely a project there. We've dusted off that feasibility study, and we've been doing a bit of work on that. And certainly at these sort of prices, it would make money, and at $10 nickel, it would be very profitable. So we're considering our options there. We've been thinking about whether we might IPO this asset separately, joint venture it, sell it in a trade sale, or retain it and spend money on it ourselves. And we're doing some studies on that right at the moment. What we like is the exploration potential. That's about 14 kilometres of strike. You can see here Emily Ann, Maggie Hayes, Abbey Rose, that was a discovery of about 10 metres at 3%, which hasn't been followed up. There probably are more komatiite deposits here. There may well be also an intrusive style Savannah Nova type target here as well. We're doing some work with the New Exco, and we're waiting for a report from them on some exploration targeting to help make our decision on this project. But still a very exciting asset with a 1.5 million tonne processing plant sitting on the surface, 200-person camp, airstrip, all the things that would take hundreds of millions of dollars and many years to get permitted, all there and all sitting there and well maintained. And then last but not least is Windara, which is the old project that the previous Poseidon was involved in, which started the Poseidon boom back in '69. That's a photograph of the old milling circuit, which has since been decommissioned and taken down. But this was mined by Western Mining between 74 and 83, and about 85,000 tonnes of nickel was mined and processed through the concentrator there. There's still about 150,000 tonnes of nickel at just over 1.5%, so good grade in underground resources, plus the gold tailings project. We want to do some work, or we are just finishing off the work on the gold tailings, about all up, including the 180,000 ounces, plus the option on Lancefield. There's about over 250,000 tonnes or 240,000 ounces of, not tonnes, ounces of gold there. And we're just finishing off a feasibility study, which we'll release hopefully in the next few weeks. And we're looking to monetize that asset, and our primary focus being nickel. There's an opportunity to bring Windara material probably down to Black Swan and process it there through the larger concentrator, or ship it up to Leinster and toll process it through the BHP asset there. So lots of optionality, a lot of studies have been done, and at the nickel price trajectory that we're looking at going forward, all of these ore bodies would make good money. So the future for us is really about delivering the Golden Swan resource, which will be next quarter, and then hopefully a reserve, subject to the resource hanging together, and then finalising offtake financing and being able to go to the board by the end of the year, or earlier with a proposal for a financial decision to invest. We want to keep drilling the Southern Terrace and see if there is another Silver Swan channel type system there that could host, 200,000 tonnes of nickel. And obviously one of the things we want to do as well is we've got that Silver Swan resource, which could be mined in conjunction with Golden Swan. So we want to convert more of that resource to reserve. At DARA, we want to do studies on trucking the ore to Black Swan or to another third party and finish off the tailings and monetize that. That's the gold project. And Lake Johnson, really, what's driving us at the moment is getting that independent study done on the targets of the exploration targets, assessing those, how much money is required, and then working out what the best way forward is for that asset. Having 3 of the assets is great, but currently with our limited funds until we're into production from Golden Swan, we don't have a lot of cash to spend on the other projects. So all of our money at the moment is going into the Golden Swan project, the drilling and the monetization of that. So look, that's Poseidon very, very quickly. It's a wonderful group of assets in a wonderful jurisdiction. Western Australia is a place you can do business, and we're lucky to have those assets and in a market where nickel is in high demand, and great to have the support of MST writing quality research on us. And I notice you've just come up with a revised valuation of 18 cents based on your very conservative forward nickel price forecast, Michael, and a spot valuation at $8, which I think is conservative for nickel going forward, of 28 or 29 cents. So I think you're right on the mark there in terms of your val. So I hope the market proves you right going forward.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks very much for your presentation, mate. That was very informative as always, and some very exciting things ahead.
Look, I don't think I said anything wrong because Brendan didn't jump across the table either.
Now, look, we've opened it up to questions. There's one question here, which I think is always on the front of mind of investors when you're exploring. How's your cash position looking, and will you need to tap the market at any time? So there's a pretty straightforward question.
That's right between the eyes, that one. Now, look, it's a good question and very fair. Look, we had $15 million at the end of the quarter, and the drilling program, is probably a $4 million program thereabouts. So we're chewing through a bit of dough, but we'll still have plenty of money in the bank by the end of the financial year. June 30, and realistically then the work that we're doing then is not as aggressive in terms of dollar spend because it's more study work. Really it depends on how much more exploration we do on the Southern Terrace, and that's dependent on the EM work that we're about to do, assuming we can get ourselves an EM crew, which they're as quite rare at the moment, but we're working on that. But yeah, look, funding, we're looking at all options in terms of what we're doing for funding. We've recognised that the Poseidon shareholders have been very generous in the past in funding this business, and there's been some dilution, and we're conscious of that. And I'm a shareholder, and I'm conscious of a history of fundraising, which was required and necessary to keep the business going. But clearly, when you've got a pathway towards production, and you've got a relatively simple production profile with high grade, then you are able to tap the debt markets, and whether that be customer debt or project financing. And we've already had approaches, based on our drilling results, from people who are interested in talking to us about debt funding. So I think there will be a combination of debt and equity. And we may need to tap our shareholders again, but it would be for a development style raising rather than an exploration funding type raise. But that's our desire. Who knows what the nickel price does? You can never be absolutely. I sound like a politician, don't I? You can never be absolutely sure, but the executive team and the board are very focused on making returns for shareholders and conscious of avoiding dilution as much as possible.
Thanks, Pete. Just following on from that, and you're talking about funding, and like particularly with the direct ship ore option, the DSO option.
Yes.
Your potential customers, potential funders, in a way, through pre-sale agreements or contribution to capital or any sort of slightly different form of funding.
Yes, absolutely, Michael. Yeah, and clearly when we go out for expressions of interest, our information memorandum will be stating that we are looking for innovative funding options. So, I mean, having my experience with the old Sally Malayan and Panoramic, absolutely. We got funding originally from Swan back, in the early 2000s for the development of the Savannah project. I'm acutely aware of the opportunities there, as is Brendan and the board. So, yeah, absolutely considering all those things. And, yep, if you deal through a trader, I mean, you saw Panoramic just recently announced that they've hooked up with Traffic Europe with a very attractive funding package for the restart of that asset. I think that's a smart move by them, and I think that's something that we would certainly be looking at. And we are talking to traders as well. So, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Now, Pete, there's another question come through from the floor. Can you at this stage hazard a guess on what the level of your payable nickel would be in a DSO situation?
No, look, we can't, and because it's such a unique product. I mean, as I mentioned before, the grade is good. We don't know what the actual mined head grade will be because we don't know what the resource grade is yet. We can make some assumptions. We don't know what the dilution will be, so what the actual grade will be. We do have the option of putting this material through an ore sorter because we're not talking about big volumes. So again, we need to do this test work to work out what the feed grade would be if we were selling ore. And then you've obviously got the added benefit. We've got copper credits, and there's cobalt in this material. It's very clean, very low arsenic, and this iron MgO ratio. So I would call this the Grange Hermitage of nickel ores in the world, probably. So, Grange gets a premium, significant premium. So, we would expect the same. We know the smelters are all chasing low MgO, high iron concentrate. So it's a premium product, and it should get a premium in the market. So payability should be at or above the current market, you would think, you would hope.
Okay. We're getting pretty close towards the time, Pete. I've just got one other question, which is a bit of not a technical question, but can you just give us a little bit of an explanation what the difference between the two DSO options are, like the direct ship ore versus
I guess it's really around, if we shipped it to BHP, historically they have operated under an OTCPA, and
yes.
That's what I was used to when, for instance, I was at Panoramic and we had the Lanfranchi asset. So when we bought Lanfranchi, we inherited an OTCPA concentrate contract, an ore tolling concentrate processing agreement. So effectively, that's one way of doing it, and realistic. And the other option would be selling it to another consumer, which would be offshore, one of the other nickel smelters, and they would operate just on a straight ore purchasing agreement. So they're kind of similar, but it's just the way that BHP and I don't know whether BHP would offer us an OTCPA or just a direct ore purchasing as opposed to that sort of concentrate arrangement, but we'll see. We're having discussions with everyone, as I said, but until we actually go out for firm offers, we won't know. But it's a bit more esoteric. It's really an ore sale, but it's how they deal with the payability at the end, really. Yeah.
Okay. All right, mate. Well, thank you very much. We've just come on to the half hour, so we've covered that off nicely. Thanks for answering the questions. Thanks for your presentation. Very exciting times for Poseidon. Lots more drilling to go in the resource drilling, and then down into the Southern Terrace. So we look forward to seeing those results coming through. And we very much appreciate your time, Pete. And thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael. And again, thanks to MST Access for arranging this. And I'll look forward to replaying it and see what I said.
Our pleasure, Pete. Good on you. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks again. See you.